Today what we're going to be working on is factoring trinomials, and for that we use master product. That's the process it's called. So I'd like you to try this, which is to factor this polynomial. So I'll give you a little hint. It is 4 terms, so there is a specific process that we think of when we have 4 terms. So give it a try and then come back and check your answers. Okay, so when we have 4 terms, we should be thinking of grouping. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. All right, now I'm looking for the GCF. So let me just write over here. We're doing grouping. All right, so the GCF of the first 2 terms is n squared. So then I have n, 2n plus 1. I notice that there is a minus in there. So I'm going to bring the minus on the outside. And the GCF of 2n minus 1 is just going to be -1. And so remember, when we factor out the negative, all the signs will change. So it'll be 2n plus 1. And then we write our factors. So the factors will be n squared minus 1 and 2n plus 1. And then I notice here that I have dots. So I'm going to factor again. 2 parentheses. Remember, the signs are different. Square root everything. Square root of n squared is n. Square root of 1 is 1. And then don't forget to bring this guy down, 2n plus 1. Okay, so now let's talk about factoring trinomials. Okay, so let's write down some rules here. So the first thing is, when we factor trinomials, tri means 3. So you have to have 3 terms in order to factor a trinomial using master product. All right, so the first thing, number 1, you're going to multiply. So don't write your notes too big. We have a few things to write for step 1 and step 2. So you're going to multiply the first term and the last term so multiply the first term and the last term, and then you're going to put that number with its sign and everything, whether it's a positive or a negative, above the last term. Okay, then, number 2, you're going to find factors of that number that add or subtract. So I'll put add/subtract, and I'll tell you how to figure that out, whether or not they're going to add or subtract, to the middle term okay, period. And then what you're gonna do is look at the last sign. So that would be the sign in front of the 2 numbers that you multiply together. That will tell you if it has to either add or subtract to the middle term. So it looks like a lot, but once you do a few, it's pretty easy. Okay, step 4. You're going to then take those numbers, take your factors, and replace the middle term with the factor. So replace the middle term, with the factors. And then lastly, you're going to then end up having 4 terms. Follow the rules for grouping. Okay, so let's get started. Let's take a look at the first example. Okay, so our first example is x squared minus 13x plus 36. So the first thing we're going to do is multiply the first term times the last term. So we're multiplying x squared times 36. So we get positive 36x squared, and look where I wrote it. I wrote it right above the last term. Okay, so I multiplied x squared times 36, and I wrote it right above the last term. And notice that I put a positive here because it's positive 36x squared. Now you want to find the factors that multiply the 36. So we can write those factors down, but then they have to add. That's why I wrote this sign down, because they have to add to the middle term. So they have to add to 13. Multiply the 36, add to 13. Multiply to the product, add to the middle term. So let's write down the factors of 36. So we have 1 times 36. Well, that doesn't add. Well, it's actually 1x and 36x. Well, that doesn't add to 13. 2x times 18x. But that does not add to 13. That actually adds to 20. 3x and 12x. But that adds to 15x. 4x and 9x. Well, that's it. 4 times 9 is 36, and 4 plus 9 is 13. So notice I have the x's there too, right? Because x times x is x squared. And 4x plus 9x is 13x. Now, when I add 4x and 9x, it has to be negative 13. That means that it has to be negative 4 and negative 9. Now you're going to take these two numbers and replace the middle term with those two numbers. So it's going to be, bring down the x squared. Now write negative 4x minus 9x. It doesn't matter if you put the 9x first. You'll still get the same answer. And then you bring down the last term over there. Now notice you have 4 terms. So now we're going to factor by grouping. So group and group here. So in the green group, the GCF is x. And then we have x minus 4 when we factor the GCF. Notice there is a minus there in the second group. So we bring out the negative. The GCF is 9, so it's actually negative 9 times x minus 4. Remember, the signs change. So then my factors are x minus 9 and x minus 4. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. So remember, we're multiplying the first times the last. So we're multiplying 4b squared times negative 25. So 4 times 25, or negative 25, is negative 100. So it'll be negative 100b squared. Okay, so now we need two numbers that multiply to 100 minus, see the sign here? That's why I put it there, minus to 15. Multiply to 100 minus to 15. So let's write down the factors. Now, you don't actually have to write the factors if you could just come up with it. And if you have a hard time figuring out what the factors are, you can always plug it into y equals and then do 100 divided by x. That'll give you a list of the factors. All right, so let's make a list. So we have 1b times 100b. Okay, but that doesn't minus to 15. We have 2b times 25b, 50b, sorry. But that doesn't minus, right, so that was 50b, sorry. But that doesn't minus to 15. 3 doesn't go into it, 4 does. 4b and 25b, but that does not minus to 15. 5b and 20b, that does minus to 15b. Okay, so now we have to figure out the signs. When these minus, okay, they have to give me positive 15. But when I multiply them, it has to be negative 100. So remember, when you multiply two numbers together, in order to get a negative, you have to have one positive and one negative. Okay, which kind of makes sense. You have to have a positive and negative in order for you to combine like terms. They'll minus. But I have to get a positive 15. So which one is going to be positive and which one's going to be negative? So it's going to be positive 20 and negative 5. Negative 5 plus 20 is positive 15. So now let's replace the middle terms. I'm replacing this guy with these. Okay, so I bring down the first term, right? So I'm going to bring that here, 4b squared. Replace the middle term with the factors, minus 5b, and again, it doesn't matter if you put the 5 or the 21st, plus 20b, as long as you have the right signs, and then bring down the last term. Now we're going to factor by grouping. So we have the first group in blue, and the red group. So in the blue group, the GCF is just b, times 4b minus 5. Now notice in the red group there is a plus there. Right in there there's a plus, so it's positive. The GCF of 20b minus 25 is 5. Times 4b minus 5. So then my factors are going to be b plus 5 and 4b minus 5. And it doesn't matter which way you write. If you have this parentheses first and then this one second, that's fine also. Okay, so let's do a couple where we actually have to do GCF first. Okay, so let's move this up here. So this says to factor. So notice, if you have 3 terms, obviously it might have to be trinomial, but you should always look for a GCF when you factor. Okay, so I do notice there is a GCF and each term is divisible by 3. So I'm going to factor out the 3. So GCF is 3, so 3 times x squared plus x minus 6. Okay, so now I have 3 terms and I'm going to do master product. So I remember I multiply the first term, x squared, times the last term, which is negative 6. So that's negative 6x squared. So just for our purposes here, I'm going to put that 1 in front of the x, so that'll help me out. All right, so now I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 6 minus, this is why I keep the sign with it, minus to a 1. So let's write down the factors of 6. So we have 1 times 6, so it's 1x and 6x. Well, they don't subtract to 1, they subtract to 5. We have 2x and 3x. Well, that looks good because 2x times 3x is 6x squared, and 3x minus 2 gives me 1. Okay, so now I know I have the right terms. Now, when I multiply my numbers together, it has to give me negative 6. So that means one has to be positive and one has to be negative. When I add them together, it gives me, I have to get a positive 1. So that would mean the 3 has to be positive and the 2 has to be negative. So now I'm going to take these 2 and replace the middle term. So I keep the first term, x squared, then put in my 2 middle terms, and it doesn't matter if you put the 2 or the 3 first, and bring down the last term. And then we're going to factor by grouping. So I group the first 2, and I'm going to group the last 2. All right, in the first group, the yellow group, the GCF is x. and the times x minus 2. In the last group, there's a positive here. So it's going to be plus, and then 3 times x minus 2. So my factors are x plus 3 times x minus 2. And then bring down the GCF, which is 3. So that would be my final answer. Okay, let's look at the last one. 12n squared plus 38n plus 20. So we're looking for the GCF. So it looks like the GCF is 2. So I am going to factor out the 2. Let me just get rid of all this too. All right, so I'm going to factor out the 2 there. So I have 2 times 6n squared plus 19n plus 10. Okay, now I'm going to do master product. Multiply 6n squared times 10. So that's positive 60n squared. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 60n squared, add to 19n. So let's put our factors on the side. So I know 1 times 1n times 60n. Well, that does not add to 19. 2 times 30, 2n times 30n. Now remember, you can, like I said before, get the factors in your calculator. If you plug it in, go to y equals, and then type in 60, divide by x, and look in your table of values. That'll give you your factors. Okay, so what else gives us 60? So we have 3n times 20n, but that does not add to 19. 4n times 15n. Okay, that looks like it's good because this adds to 19n. Okay, so now when I multiply 4 times 15, it has to give me positive 60. So that means they have to be the same signs, right? Because that's how you get a positive number, is to have either a negative negative or positive positive. But when I add them, it has to give me positive 19. So that would mean that they have to be plus plus. Okay, so now let's replace the middle term, 19n, with those 2 numbers. So bring down the first term, 6n squared. Replace 4n plus 15n, and bring down the last term. Okay, now we're going to use grouping. First group, and we'll use the green group here. In the red group, the GCF is 2n. And then I would have 3n plus 2. I have a positive there, so it's plus. GCF of 15 and 10 is 5 times 3n plus 2. Almost done. My factors are 2n plus 5, 3n plus 2. And the last thing is don't forget to bring down that GCF, which is a 2. Okay, so that's it, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.